Morning, Deirdre.
Good morning, Tom. How are you today?
It's still cold. I gotta get out of this series. I mean, unfortunately, I think there may be too many episodes here that we're going to be going through.
Correct. It may be spring before you leave Iceland there.
Iceland, yes, yes. Although it seems from everything I've seen, it may be a bit forbidding for some of us, but it sure is a beautiful place.
Yes,
We are on the Agentic AI board debate series. We're
correct.
into the making a decision aspect of this. This is video 71-2A because I believe we're going to have a 2B because we have so much material to say. So where we are in this process, you and I've held the discussion, the board discussion. Actually, it turned out to be a preparation for a board meeting. Uh, and it was a discussion between a role you were playing, which is CEO, and a role I was playing, which was the board chair lead investor of the business. And we're going to be dealing with the first part of that discussion, which is where we ended up agreeing on a topic to discuss at the board, but then realizing in the second part that the board wasn't quite ready. And then we realized maybe the company wasn't quite ready for the discussion either. And then that led to a whole discussion about, okay, we need to put a plan in place. And we needed to then both of us go off and come back later. So that's where we left it in this discussion. Um, what today is about is to look back on that role playing, those two role playing videos, or at least the first role playing video, and to say, um, all right, what happened there? Why did it happen? And could it have been done better, or could that individual, either the board director or the CEO, could they have seen better and prepared better to be able to make a decision? The point being, did it really require two different meetings? Could you have done it in one meeting? And the answer is you probably could have, but this is a tricky topic. And as we'll show in this discussion in this video, that even if you're properly prepared with what we hope will be the capabilities that we'll pass to you to see this, it still could be a tricky situation. So with that, Deirdre, I'm going to let you. We're not going to be in this phase. We don't get into our roles. I know you and I were having a little bit of a debate. I'm a little bit not 100% today health wise, and you were just beating the heck out of me saying, that you really didn't do a very good job there in that. But I mean, look, I was doing the best I could. I was dealing with a tough CEO on the other side of the table, Deirdre.
Right. We're joking here.
Yes, we
But
are.
if you'll
We
remember
did
that
have a fun discussion on that subject, though, trying to figure out
we
why did
did.
the discussion go the way it went.
We did. And jumping right into it, I would say the discussion did not go optimally
Yes.
because neither the board chair nor the CEO was ready for the discussion. In
Yes.
fact, looking back on it, I think that the CEO, that's the role I played, was operating more at well, first a panic level, but more at a task level. When people are in panics, they move to tasks because you can accomplish tasks. Well, what a CEO should be doing, the work of a CEO is strategy. And the CEO should have come to this meeting, the conversation with the board chair, at the strategic level, having a strategic level conversation. That didn't happen. But if you'll think back to that particular conversation, there were actually three aspects to it. The CEO called the board chair and said, "We've got to talk." And the board chair agreed to talk about the conversation of bringing AI into the organization. Then, as the conversation started, both the CEO and the board chair realized that neither the board nor the organization was ready to even have a conversation about AI or more advanced forms of AI, let alone develop a strategy or agree on a strategy and a path forward for implementing AI. And then the CEO and the board agreed on a schedule that they would have a board meeting in mid-February, but that the two of them would get together in a week to propose plans for preparing both the board and the organization for that February board meeting. Now, we'll talk about the preparation for the development of the plans in our next video. That's video 71 2B. What we'll do in this video is talk about how in the world could both the CEO and the board chair, and I've got to admit, more so the CEO, have been better prepared for a conversation with the board chair on so critical a topic. And that's what we'll start to talk about right now.
I will
So,
say you know, um, these kinds of discussion, this kind of topic is exactly the kind of topic where you expect things are not going to go well or go easily. And one of the reasons why you're going to get into that now. So this is one of those topics that if anything was going to not be an easy discussion, this is the kind of topic that would not be easy.
mhm. And it's when the conversations are not easy that you have to double down and make sure that you use the tools to do your preparation so that you can walk in not looking as frazzled and unprepared as I looked when I was in the role of CEO.
Yes.
So we're going to talk through right now two aspects of it. One is the characteristics of the CEO, but then also some of the tools that the CEO could have used to better prepare for this meeting. And they're tools that we've discussed previously. In fact, we have videos on some of these tools in themselves, some of our early videos, but let's go over them in this context. The first tool I'm going to mention is what you and I call the radar screen. And we call it the radar screen because everyone's familiar with radar screens, the green thing, and it has everything on it that the person watching the radar screen has to be paying attention to. That's our analogy for the work of the CEO, that the green ground on the radar screen is what we call the mindset of the CEO, how the CEO had to develop their capabilities, instinct, and guts, frankly, to get to the point where they are the CEO of a large corporation. And then on the radar screen itself, always in the context of the mindset, we have some various other aspects, the responsibilities of the leader, the approach, the strategy involved, the leadership and management model and value exchange. And we'll wind up over the course of these two videos talking about all of that, although we'll focus in three areas today in this video because they're most appropriate for preparing for this first conversation with the board chair. And I'm going to go back to the whole concept of the mindset of the CEO. Has this CEO been keeping up with the development of a mindset? Now, the way I always describe the mindset to students, and then students always look horrified when I go through this, but the mindset is based in knowledge and judgment from understanding the marketplace, competitors, customers, emerging technologies, the industry, business and social factors, and anything else that's appropriate that has to be watched. And good people, good aspiring executives start from the very first day on their job, starting to gain the information, think about the information they're gaining, form their opinions, form the way they go about their jobs, and so forth. It involves a lot of monitoring, and particularly monitoring of the marketplace, what's happening out there. And that's where I'm going to drill down right now. In fact, the very first thing that the CEO should have been focusing on is the marketplace. Now, anyone who's been paying attention knows that business media, the tech companies themselves are just hammering home. Everyone's got to do this. Everyone's got to pick up these different models. Agents are the latest thing and so forth. There's very little conversation about whether it's appropriate to do this in a particular organization, how you do it, how a board or a CEO would make decisions to go about using it. And that's part of the reason that the CEO looks so frazzled in this conversation. The CEO has picked up that this organization has to be doing this stuff, whatever this stuff is. And that was a topic we got into in the videos 1A and 1B. Knows that the board has to sign off of it, but truly has a sense that something's off here. And I think this comes from not understanding or not having a firm grasp on the marketplace generally. Someone having that grasp would understand the context of why the business media is saying this and that, why the tech companies are saying this and that, about the different products that the tech companies are offering. You and I, Tom, have spent a lot of time distinguishing between the different LLMs, the different agents, and the different capabilities brought forth by the different companies. That's something that anyone in the CEO role, frankly, should know. And our videos, 62 through 69, take people through that if you need to review that conversation. But the other thing to know about the marketplace is how fragmented it is right now. It's not as if we're back in the 1970s when people had a sense that there was one marketplace with all of the aspects working together. Now it's as if the marketplace consists of 10,000 different elements all going off on their own. And it's the job of a CEO of an organization to organize enough of those elements in a way that makes sense for the organization so the organization can succeed in and among all of this fragmentation. So that's work that it looks to us as if the CEO didn't do. Another element on our radar screen is the whole concept of, I used the word strategy earlier. It's really the vision, the mission, and the strategy, the elements that form the strategic approach and initiatives that this organization puts together. Very briefly, the vision is where you're headed, what you're going to do, what you're going to achieve there, what outcomes you want. The mission is your general way of achieving that outcome. And then the strategy itself is your approach to meeting your mission. It didn't sound to me as if the CEO had any sense whether the current vision, mission, and strategy of this organization were consistent with the use of AI, how these elements had to be adjusted for the use of AI, what that meant for any of the parts of the organization. I think the CEO demonstrated a sense that everything was off here. Like, are we going to have the same outcome here if we use whatever form of AI we wind up running? Certainly, how we approach implementing this is going to change, but we don't know how. Clearly, there was more work that the CEO should have done, not just could have done, but should have done before approaching the board chair to have a conversation about this. At least have a sense. Remember, one of the aspects of mindset is the emerging technologies. Did the CEO have enough of a mindset of the emerging technologies, not deep knowledge, but a sense of the technologies to even begin to be able to address the whole concept of the vision, mission, and strategy here? The third thing to pick up, we think, from the radar screen, and again, we'll come back to all elements of the radar screen in this video and the next one, is our whole leadership and management model. And we've done videos discussing the leadership and management model. Very basically, what this model shows is what the leader does, the CEO does, what the management team does to develop, execute, assess, and then revise the strategy. Basically, it's the what, the when, the why, and the how that you're going to do this. And if the CEO had no sense of what was going to happen in the strategy, analysis of the leadership and management model, heck, not an analysis, one glance at the leadership and management model could have told the CEO ahead of time that the organization was nowhere near ready to even think about this. And this suggests that the CEO should have done a lot more work before actually talking with the board chair. Possibly have picked up the phone and called the board chair to say, look, we have to have a conversation on this. I want to do about 2 weeks' work here before I'm ready for this, but I want to prep you and get a date on the calendar. But then the CEO should have at least done the thinking that I've been outlining here. Note, I'm talking at a very high level here, at the very high top level strategy here, not talking about any details of initiatives and so forth, but just at the top level of strategy, have a sense of that to be able to have a more coherent, organized, unpanicked discussion with the board chair about that. And that would have changed the whole tone of that conversation in 1A. So before I go on here, Tom, let me stop here. And do you have any points you want to make about this so far?
Yes, that's exactly my perspective, and you could really mirror the board director there too, because the board director had not done a great deal more of that either in this work. I don't think, at least that wasn't the way we were attempting to portray it. What I would say, if I could just go back and put a little bit of my perspective on exactly what you said, Deirdre, because it's really important work. And you call this whole thing the mindset of the leader, that it's what do you have to be as a leader to do this work? It's
Yes.
like the job of a surgeon or the job of a pipe fitter or the job of an architect or the job of a mechanic. You have to be a certain way. You have to think a certain way. You have to have skill in a certain way, develop your own set of expertise, your own set of training, your own set of capabilities. And you contend that's the mindset of a leader. And then that mindset shifts based on what the context is. I'm either a leader in the military, I'm a leader in politics, I'm a leader in business, I'm a leader in whatever, a company. And then, but the essence of it, when you and I think about it, we think about the essence of that is to know the marketplace. It is the core. And if you don't have your hands on that marketplace, you don't sense it, you're going to miss things. You're going to miss things. And the thing that struck me and you about this was that the one thing that if you're really tied into looking at the marketplace for the not the consumer use of AI, but the commercial use of AI, you know that the marketplace there are red flags all over the place. There are trust issues, there's fear issues, there are cost issues, there are control issues, there are cyber issues, and probably in your and my mind, I think just the fact we talk about this so frequently, we kind of know the way the other person thinks. It's that there's the whole issue of inflating expectations, both negatively and positively. There's a bunch of hot rhetoric on this is where, oh my gosh, we're going to panic everybody and we're going to lay everybody off and whatever. And what in that, just that, regardless of whether how much of that is real, how much is not real, we know what's going on. Whenever you see that kind of a situation or you have that kind of a situation and you're going in to have a discussion with the board about that or with any of the senior advisors, investors, or even have a discussion with your board director, you know that that area is hot with issues. So it's really important that you understand the context. What are you walking into? And then not only are you prepared for it, but is your audience prepared and is your team prepared? And this is the thing that struck us. If you're a good salesperson or you're a good biz dev person, you do this instinctively. You know, right? You know, you spend a lot of time. Is that person I'm going to go talk there, are they ready for my discussion? Have I matched my discussion against that person? I guess you and I would say, in this particular case, that was probably the biggest failing here, was not doing that good sales prep work that a good salesperson does, is to say, look, this is a minefield. This whole subject of agentic AI, boards are being told they have to make sure it's being done. CEOs are being told you're going to get pressure from your board. And then CEOs are looking at it, say it's costly and it's being built into darn near everything I'm doing, including the platform we're using today when I had to shut it off earlier. Um, and you just say, what do I do? What do I do here? And how do I deal with it responsibly? Reason we do it is we don't know where any of the data is going. So I don't want to have our platform consuming our data in a way that I don't control.
Right.
Um, by the way, there's a lot of other problems with what I just said, but be that as it may, you try to limit as much of your damage as you can. That's the first place, is this marketplace issue, the essence. What is the essence? And have I really got my arms around it? In a case like this, you'd have called me, you'd said, look, Tom, I want to talk about this, but this thing is a hot issue, and I don't even know if I'm prepared to talk about it. Would you mind spending some time, even on the phone, unless you and I at least try to see if we can come to a common level? That's probably what it would have made the first real meeting more productive. And
Yeah.
that's the one thing to keep in mind. You don't always have to do that, but I think in this particular case, when you're facing one of these issues where the marketplace is red flags, I think then for good or bad, right? Then it is something that you should do. I think the other thing that you and I took away from this is that neither well, one could say that the board chair had an expectation of the end result being that the board was going to be a messy discussion. Um, I don't think the board chair had figured out how messy it was going to be, right? Until they made the phone call. Then they realized, whoa, this is really messy. But the CEO hadn't gotten that far. That was your point about tactics versus strategy, right?
Right.
One of the things that you and I talk about is this, is you call it, it's the strategy model we have, which starts with vision, then goes to mission, then goes to strategy, and ultimately ends up with execution, right? So it's the idea of, have you envisioned the outcome? That's what vision is, right? So yes, some people envision the outcome being we're going to live on Mars. Okay, that's a big vision. Another is I want to end that discussion in the board on time with a really pithy discussion, and I now have confirmation that I'm going to execute agentic AI in the following strategy in our company, and it's complementary of what I'm doing for the rest of the company. That's the outcome. That's the other way to think about a vision, envisioning the outcome. And the beauty of bringing the strategy model into just even a board meeting, it forces you to think about the outcome that you want. That's really the point. You and I do this all the time. We were working on another completely separate project over the last 4 or 5 days over the weekend. We were constantly looking at the vision. What is it? What do we want the outcome of this, of not only of what are we trying to portray the outcome in the work we were doing, but also then using the work, what do we want the outcome to be? And even
Right.
there, I wasn't clear. You were trying to still get me to that point, and I finally got to that point yesterday. So it's not an easy thing to do, but I think that's hugely valuable. So that's why we talk about the strategy model to be employed, even in something like this. It's not because we're going to come up with a brand new strategy for the company. It's about what you said. It's about I want to make sure that I would like to make sure that I'm fitting this in, not only itself, that it has an end result that I'm anticipating, but also that it fits in with the strategy of the company that we are pursuing. And then that last point about the leadership and management model, that's about doing the work. And you
Right.
have to be able to if you go down through and you start at the marketplace and then you come down to, okay, what do I want the outcome to be? And can I envision a strategy which is really an approach to getting the work done? And then I can turn it down to okay, what are we going to exactly do? When are we going to do it? Why are we doing it? How are we doing it? And who's doing it? And make sure we can now execute between the leadership and the management. You've got you've got the framework built for getting something done. And the thing that you and I took away, and we were trying to portray in this, is that if you think about it with just that tool, that set of tools right there, we were nowhere close.
Nowhere close.
And that says that that's why you got that discussion that felt uncomfortable. Both sides felt unprepared. They weren't aligned, right? They were very polite with each other, but they
Right.
weren't aligned. And you even said, rightfully so, at times the board chair kind of took a superior position, not superior as an individual, but a superior, look, I'm trying to get higher. I'm trying to, and but then eventually they got themselves together. But notice when they did near the end, then it became a real discussion. Then it was working on answer, right? Not
Right.
trying to figure out, okay, what do we do here? And are we going to end up with the right answer? So we haven't even gotten to the key of the discussion, right? Which is where we get to the second part of it, Deirdre, which you indicated to me that you saw, there were three phases of this first discussion. The first one just was agreeing on what the topic was,
Right.
right? And there was a discussion you and I had about, well, what was really the topic? The point was we'd been using AI in the company for a very long time. We were using it as a backroom operation for process automation, coding, our own coding we do, and spanning all the way back to using spam filters. So yeah, have we been using learning models in our company? Of course we have. Everybody has to some degree. Now, are we ready to turn it client facing? And at the same time, are we going to deploy that with an agent architecture, right? And how independent are we going to allow these agents to operate in the process? That is a big decision. That's a
Right.
very big decision. And because of the outcome, the potential outcomes that you're looking at. And so just to get to the point where you're saying, okay, wait a minute, this is a bigger topic than you or I in those roles were seeing. So I want to stop before we wrap this up and move to the second phase of this, Deirdre. But to come back, and I was just saying, there were plenty of ways that this could have been, the first part could have been done better, which would have caused us to not spend as much time in that meeting, and even perhaps doing it in one meeting instead of two meetings. But
Correct.
that being said, I'm going to turn it back to you now to take the discussion further.
Okay. The second aspect that you were talking about, the first is agreeing on the topic. The second is, it happened in that conversation, was that both the board chair and the CEO realized that the board and the organization were not ready to do
Mhm.
this, which is, if you think about it, a bit astonishing because too many people still, and we know this, we've talked with people about this, still think you just install the software and use it and that's it. But it doesn't work that way. So to help think through how you would have prepared for understanding whether the board and organization were ready, we're going to turn to what we call our three questions. These are the three questions for the first part of what we call our organizing structure, which is assess, decide, accomplish. And the three questions are up in the assess area. It's what am I missing? Are motivations aligned? And what's the time factor here? What time do I have? So let's look at these. What am I missing? Well, where do I start? On this particular thing. That, first of all, for example, the CEO was put in a panic because she was relying on the business media to form her opinions. She did not do the work did not develop her mindset to the point of understanding the emerging technology and then going forward and doing an analysis, some sort of assessment of what are the capabilities of this organization, what would have to change, how would we fit this in, how could we possibly even think about implementing this. Again, this is all at a very top level before going and having a first conversation with the board director. But let's also pull this back to marketplace. That we talked about the fragmentation of the marketplace. Remember that all CEOs are hearing all of this stuff from the tech companies, from the business media. They're all frazzled. They're all trying to figure this out. What does this mean in terms of customers? What does this mean in terms of competitors? Are competitors going to pull the market in another way? Or do I have to be aware? What does this mean in terms of the economics of this whole situation? What am I missing here in this marketplace here? And that's where you really have to look. And I think a lot of what it comes down to when you're talking about emerging technologies is how does the marketplace perceive this technology? Remember, just as the CEO is getting all of these conflicting messages from the business media, so too customers, and these are both business customers and individual customers, are hearing about all of the problems with AI. They're hearing about the misuse of data. They're hearing about hallucinations. They're hearing about bad answers and so forth. So is your particular part of the marketplace ready for this? If you're operating in the consumer marketplace, think a couple of times and do some research here. If you're operating in the business marketplace, maybe you're closer, but you've got to talk to your main customers out here. You're missing a sense of how your customers perceive what's going on here. This is all part of mindset. Remember, customers are part of mindset. You also have to, what am I missing in terms of how would I implement this stuff? We were talking about this in the first conversation that when you're talking about AI, you could be talking about LLMs, you could be talking about AI agents individually, you could be talking about AI agent infrastructure where you string together a number of agents to control a number of processes or the whole corporation or whatever it is here. You have to have, if you're not, in terms of what you're missing, you need to understand where you might start applying these technologies to your organizations. It's also, Tom, the concept of are there use cases or are there just applications here? And that's a whole other matter when you're talking about AI agents. But I've been talking for a while here, and I think you want to jump in here.
There's so much raw meat here. In the missing thing, just dealing with that, I think the thing that we concluded, which is kind of a chicken and egg thing, the thing we concluded is so few people, other than the people that work with it every single day deeply, haven't internalized this technology yet. They really don't understand it well. I mean, you and I, we were using it on this separate project we were dealing with over the last 5 days. It's incredibly powerful.
Correct.
And can be really fun to use. But you have to direct the research. You have to then take the research. You have to write up you have to put your input in just as if a piece of research. And then you have to have the synthesis done. The beauty of it is it just saves an enormous amount of time in synthesizing, and it can synthesize multiple streams of information. It can take a book you might have written, it can take a philosophical paper about technology that I wrote, and it can take research you directed, and it can synthesize those three things into interesting ways of looking at the situation. You then have to go and redirect it, which we did, and synthesize into something. But you can do stuff that it would take weeks to do. We were able to do in not a short period of time and not a few hours, very hard work, but it was interesting and really powerful.
Right.
Unless you can use those models like that, you don't see these
Correct.
things. And unfortunately, this is such a new technology for us. It was like when, and I know we're bringing up something, and most of the people watching this video will have no clue what we're talking about. When the internet was enabled, really became enabled commercially rather
Right,
than just in the scientific community and actually
right,
in the academic community, scientific first, and then leads into the academic. Um, until you got on it and started using it, and started reading those early blogs or started using communication capabilities or doing things with it, until you got to that, you couldn't really begin seeing how it could be used. Um, that was the real insight here, is that in order to see whether we can get our people moving, um, and that picks up on the time point, which we'll get to in a second, we think you have to be able to use it. And it's a
correct.
shame because it's not quite so ubiquitous that you start using it as a child and you now are an adult and you've been using it your whole life, so you know how to use it. Like you can use devices if you're in your 30s or 20s these days because you've been using it for so long. Um, so it's not quite there yet. And as a result, we thought the thing that we saw that was missing is this gap in what the real capabilities are that can be applied in smart ways versus what people are being told by others. And that was the key point about the missing. And one of the realities of this is, have you ever done it? This is something that I learned many, many years ago when I was doing things when I was young, is they didn't matter. It didn't matter what rank you were in whatever organization you were in. You had to do it just like everybody else. And that way even though you kind of timed out of it after a while in your career, you still had done it, right? And in the business world, it was counting inventory parts in IBM's facility in Rochester, Minnesota. You learn about accounting and inventory and cost accounting. But
Right.
it's a lesson you'll learn for life. I mean, then you really do understand this. This, I think, is where we are with this particular technology, and that was the piece that was so missing here, is the lack of good knowledge about the power of this capability. Um, I'm going to turn motivation over to you, Deirdre, and to talk about the point about motivation, which is the second of the three assess questions.
Right. I do want to slip in one more point about what you're missing,
You
because
you
it's
miss
not
you wish you had done this the accounting work that I
uh,
did.
exactly, Tom. I like accounting, but anyway, it's that it's not just knowing how to use these models, it's understanding how the use of the models change the substance of work. This is
Yes.
something that you and I have talked about in multiple videos here. But when the CEO is talking about the organization isn't ready, that's one of the main points to be covered there. How will processes change? Does changing these processes mean I have to change these processes? Are these going to be linked? What does that mean for organization structure and so forth? These are substantial questions that clearly neither the CEO nor the board chair was even thinking about, even ready to address. But enough of that. Let's go on to motivations. Are motivations aligned? Well, you and I have pointed out multiple times, Tom, that most business people are not aligned in terms of motivations with the tech companies who want people to just pick up and use their models regardless of what the business is, what it does, what its vision, mission, strategy is, and so forth. That there's a real disconnect between use my LLM and, well, how can I use this given what my organization is? So there's a real misalignment in motivations there. But in this particular instance, think about the alignment of motivations between the board and the organization. Just as the CEO and the board chair were probably misaligned there, although they moved more into alignment as the conversation went on. So when we got to jumping ahead to video 1B there, when we were talking about board renegades and resisting leadership team members and so forth, there isn't much alignment within these two components, within the board and within the organization. And any business leader knows that when you're making a substantial change, as this sort of move into the use of an emerging technology would be, you need to work toward alignment among people, or else things go haywire. That's the best word for it, haywire there. So you've got to have this internal alignment within an organization. You likely have to work toward a fair degree of internal alignment on the board, although boards by their nature are going to or should have some disagreement on aspects of things, although I suggest that there should be a fair amount of alignment when making this sort of major strategic shift. And you can talk more about that, Tom. But also, you have to have alignment externally. Most businesses these days will operate in their marketplace. Could this work? Um, could the movement into the use of, for example, AI agents disrupt the marketplace in a way that's favorable or unfavorable to the organization? Or if the organization is operating on a platform, how would the use of AI agents disrupt the use of that platform? Would they have to would the organization have to move to other platforms and so forth? So there are all sorts of aspects to this alignment of motivations, the board, with the tech companies, internally, externally, leadership team, board, and so forth. And don't forget customer reactions here. That we've actually seen it happen many times over the course of the past, 10 years, where a company has moved ahead with a technology and the customers are saying, I don't want to use that technology, or this is not how I want to use this technology, or I don't like the way you're collecting data, so I'm not going to use you any further, or any other aspects here. So, are motivations aligned is a major, major question that has to be thought through, not just brushed aside. Now, I'm sure you have things to say about motivations too.
That should have been clear when you were looking at the marketplace. When you've
Correct.
got this marketplace where you have all these different situations that you and I are talking about, that, as we were saying earlier this morning when we were preparing for this, we were saying this isn't like the CRM market where we could say, well, people kind of are aligned around what CRM is. They're
Right.
not aligned around what AI is. They're not even aligned around what agents really, I think, if you understand the true definition, maybe, but the whole subject is still too squishy. By the way, not a terrible thing. It offers tremendous opportunity. So it's not bad from an entrepreneur's point of view or a founder's point of view. Regardless, it is reality. And that throws in that you, by definition, you're not going to be aligned because then you're all going to have different opinions. You're not going to have the same information. So how can you be aligned unless you're lucky, right?
Right.
Unless you're lucky. And the subject really isn't automatically that it has to be aligned. It just has to be that you understand it and can work with it. It can be
Right.
completely unaligned, but you have to find that point of intersection so you can at least manage things. And that's the beauty of doing this work well, is to figure out, have you anticipated what that other side is thinking, and can you make that connection that gets things done? And so it's to be able to find motivation alignment that works, right?
Mhm.
Whether it's completely aligned or not. Also, then, Deirdre, it's the concept of time. Is time your enemy or is time your friend? And what we say that for is we say it that way because time, when it's your enemy, it means that you don't have a lot of time to mess around because you're going to miss something. Um, or don't be too quick. And that's when time can be your friend, when you can say, you know what? I'm going to back away from this and give it a little bit of time to develop a bit further before I take an action. Now, you and I set the situation up, which is what we believe is true. This one, you don't, time is not your friend.
Mhm.
And time is not your friend. And I'll start down this path, Deirdre, and then I'm going to throw it over to you to elaborate on. I'll just use one example of why it's not, and I'm going to steal yours. Your people are already using this stuff,
Right.
and you don't aren't most likely, unless you're in a highly regulated or highly controlled environment, and there are plenty of those, but unless you are, you may not even know the models they're using it to be able to do work that is critical work. And as a result, what are the influences of those models, and they aligned with what you want, right? So I'm going to let you have fun here and pursue this subject of alignment from,
Okay.
excuse me, the time component and how that fits in this case.
If you'll remember, Tom, time did not come up in the conversations, either of the conversations, except when they were setting a schedule for when are we going
Yes.
to have the board meeting. But remember also that the CEO was in a frazzled, panicked state, which would suggest that she thought that something had to happen immediately. Now, if she had done the analysis, if she had asked these questions and spent the time thinking about time, if she had known her marketplace, because frankly, it's the marketplace which compels immediate action if immediate action is necessary, or a knowledge of the marketplace and emerging technologies could say, wait a second, like we have to start the discussions, but we can take a little time, not in vast amounts of time, but a little time in figuring this out. She didn't know that. And what that meant is that she was not able to communicate the urgency that she felt to the board chair. Because I think the board chair might have been sitting there. Now I'm doing some projection here. Might have been sitting there saying, why is she so frazzled? Why the panic? Like we haven't talked about this before, and all of a sudden it's a major issue. What's going on here? And the board chair himself would likely have to go through the assess questions. What am I missing? What are the motivations? What's the time factor here? Another aspect of this, though, is that having developed a sense that board development needs to happen, organization development, training, and so forth, time is needed there. In
Yes.
fact, the plans that they set out in Conversation 1B, which we'll get to in the next video, called for a full 2 months of just preparing the people and then, teaching the people the technology for 1 month and then giving them another month to start figuring out how we're going to use it. And those, frankly, are fairly short time frames for that type of work. So that you needed a minimum of that amount of time going forward, maybe not even to get where you need to be, because the next step, of course, would be actually preparing the organization on the basis of what the leadership team has learned. You've lost control of your time here. That if time is urgent here, you're well behind already. You haven't been thinking about this. If the CEO had developed the mindset and had been serious about creating the radar screen with all of the elements to be paying attention to, including marketplace, emerging technologies, developing the knowledge, and so forth, this CEO would have already had a sense of the need to start already if you want to get something in place, probably 6 months from now. That's a fairly minimum time frame, given all of the development, learning, training, getting the right team on board. We haven't even talked about team yet, but getting the right team on board and so forth. So time is an enemy here. May not be a full enemy. You may have a little time to figure this out, but you're late in starting to figure this out. And frankly, the board is late in bringing this up with the CEO. A really sharp, on target board would have already brought up this subject to the CEO. They would have had the first conversation earlier. So, Time is a major factor here, particularly when you're dealing with emerging technologies that seem to change hourly, and so forth. So,
Yeah,
I
you
don't
you
know.
you hit the nail on the head that the we set up uh, maybe a real possible situation where you do have a board that may be not very well versed in this, and some not very well versed, more versed in the hype, for example, and just looking at some of the educational programs being offered by generally outstanding institutions. They're just not up to what, at least the ones we've seen. I'm sure there are some that have been exposed to, or we've known people that have attended and received feedback on. They're just not up to doing this well, preparing the boards or the top level leaders for these subjects, for discussions about these subjects. And this
Right,
is the reason why we have this board debate series, Deirdre, is because
right,
in order to do these things, do the job of the leadership team well, board chairs, CEOs, or whoever is leading your business, whatever you want to call them, managing directors or founder or whatever, and then the team of people that are helping make things happen. Uh, to do those well, you have to be leading the future,
yes,
right? You have to be leading the future. And in order to do that, we think you have to do three things. You have to be able to talk about it, right, in a meaningful way so that you can communicate
right,
among each other about it, which is the point behind our discussion piece. Secondly, you have to have the capability of making decisions around it, meaning you have enough experience in leading to know what it takes to lead. Plus, you have enough foundation to be able to have the fundamentals of how does business function today, right?
right,
And to be able to make those decisions. That's the point behind these making a decision series to make sure you've got the tools you need. And we'll let you put the experience and foundation in place, but we'll give you the tools that'll help you be able to see the potential issues. And then finally, we have the university or the fundamentals, which is if you don't have those fundamentals, that's the point behind the third series. So that's why we built this series in the first place, and done it in the context of real issues that the top people are facing in organizations today and going forward. And it's the practical side of it.
it's
How
the
do you
practice.
get things done? And this issue of time is one of the most important things. It's making sure you have good judgment. One thing that keeps flowing through here, Deirdre, is the issue of judgment. And that'll get to the final piece of this, which is, when the two of us concluded, look, we have a board that's not ready for this. We have an organization that's not ready for this. We need to get them ready. Why don't the two of us independently go off, spend a little bit of time putting a plan together to get them ready, and then let's get back together quickly in 1 week and let's compare what we want to do.
Right,
And that piece of getting to that decision on what are we actually going to do, which was very different than the decision that you wanted to drive at the beginning of the meeting, right? The beginning of the meeting was, I want to get the board to agree with a strategy I'm putting together on how to use agentic AI in this organization for forward-looking, customer-serving
right,
processes, right? We
right,
ended up with, no, no, no. The decision we're making is to let's get the organization prepared to maybe have that discussion, maybe a watered down version of that just talks about the whole strategy of AR for the whole company. So why don't you take it, Deirdre, and to get us going in the final piece, which is this piece about deciding we needed to put a plan in place to get everybody prepared.
Well, let me jump in and say something else first. And that is, we've talked a number of times about, are you, as the leader, the right person here? In fact, the CEO says that outright. The board chair is probably wondering whether he did it. And we've also indicated in this conversation that you have to get your mindset right. You have to have done your work. You have to know your marketplace. You have to answer these questions. And what I'm getting at here is the leadership responsibilities that you and I talk about. And we've done videos on those and people can look at them. So I'll just mention them a little, or some of them quickly here, because we'll come back to this in our next video as well. But the very first one is, have you remained an expert in your field?
Right.
No CEO should be that flustered. Knowing that technology is changing that quickly, is emerging, knowing that AI has been discussed for years now. No CEO should be that flustered about answering a question as to do we have to use this new technology, when, now, how do we do it, and so forth. Similarly, all leaders should have been building the culture and the team that they need already. The question of the readiness of the organization is, well, it shouldn't have come up. The CEO had enough time to make sure, even if not absolutely preparing the organization to use AI agents, at least to move them into using LLMs or to figure out the current usage. If I know that my employees are using any of the 10, 20 LLMs out there, what does this fracturing of the use of technology mean for quality assurance in my organization? Do we as an organization have policies surrounding the use of these? Have we selected policies to generate data? You can't have, for example, output from the different models, which are trained differently on different data sets, all be synthesized into the same report and have something coherent come out of it. Those are things that should have been addressed 2 years ago by the CEO, and that work seems not to be done. Not to have been done. So, and these are some aspects. As the CEO even thought about what kind of strategy, what kind of operationalization, and so forth. These are all leadership responsibilities that seem to be missing here. But anyway, we'll come back to these further. Your question to me right now has been, all right, let's get to the third part, the coming of the plan. Clearly, on the basis of answering these questions, what am I missing? What are the motivations? What time factors involved here? And thinking through the marketplace and the readiness of the organization and the board, both the board chair and the CEO realized that development work had to be done. And the way that the first conversation, this is our video 71-1A, ended, is that they set a date for the board discussion, mid-February, but in just 1 week, they would come back with plans for starting to work on filling in the gaps, the missing parts. You would talk with the board chair, you in character as board chair would talk with the board. And that's when you figured out you've got a renegade board and far more disorganization than you thought about. I would talk with my leadership team, and I found out that of the 20 people in my top leadership team, only about 5 of them were prepared to even deal with the topic. And that included some key people, like my CFO was not ready to discuss this topic. That's a major, major red flag. So our plans included training and development work so that we could even come into the board discussion in mid-February with some semblance of coherence and a sense of an organization to that conversation. This speaks to an organization and a board that's not prepared. The reason for that hesitation there was I wanted to slip in there that, frankly, given what the conversations you and I, Tom, have been having with people, this is not a unique situation.
No.
This is actually the status of most organizations and boards out there right now.
I think that's right. I think we'd probably be more surprised I think those that are very deep in tech, clearly their boards are much more aligned. But but I think this is more the common place than not. Deirdre, it leads to this final point about this final turning point when we decided we needed to schedule a plan. One of the things that you can quickly do if you want to short circuit um, any of these other tools is you can go down the leadership responsibilities that you were talking about just a moment ago and just ask yourself, and in this particular case, you could have asked yourself, are you meeting these responsibilities? The one, have you remained expert in your field? That would have told you right away, maybe, maybe not. It's questionable. That's the question. Whenever you start there, and it doesn't necessarily have to be perfect answers to any of these. It's when you get a bunch of them that come up questionable. That's when it's signaling something to you. It doesn't diagnose it exactly. This isn't a automatic diagnostic process. It's just a way of flagging something for you. The second one is do your job and get the job done. That is now, you could say one of the things you and I both said in this video near the end was it's my job to get you a board you can work with. And you were saying I need to get a team together that can do what I need it to do. Now, we said it a little bit peripherally in the first, but in the second video, it was very strong that I had to do that. And we even talked about the fact that both of us look at we may have to replace some people because we get bad signals from whether we can even get them to where we need them to be. Not whether we, like them or not, but it's what can they in this period of time do what we need them to do? Will they have the appetite? Will they accept the change? Are they learning machines themselves, right? The third one is thinking strategically. Now, people can think strategically, but thinking strategically, with the way you and I define this, Deirdre, it is where you're looking at it and you're constantly working at it. Okay, does it fit the marketplace? Is there a strategic gap in there I'm trying to fulfill? Or is there a problem I'm trying to solve that has viability and does it work through to a value exchange that makes sense for me to go after, whether that's hard value or soft, right? You start thinking your way through that. Then there is as you said, that you know how the substance of your work is changing, or the work not only of you, but of your organization, your team. You can see it, you can envision it. This is a case where that would have told you right away, this is a major issue that is
Right.
way beyond a tactical decision where you get the board together and let's decide on what we're going to do because it's significant. Um, do you have a bias for action? Now, this is balanced against the time factor. A bias for action is fine as long as you weight it against is time your friend or time your enemy, right? So it's not, I'm going to step on the accelerator constantly. It's, I want to, is now the right time or not the right time, right? So it's that subtle judgment that all great leaders have, right? It's all built on judgment. Um, Point you make. Is this about problems or opportunities or both, or can you convert one into the other? More problems into opportunities, not opportunities into problems. That's
Right.
kind of not what you want to do. But, do you think about it that way? Right? Have you figured out that your job is to figure out what's going on there? Building the team you need, right? This was your point. Then is the culture you need. Are you building it? Have you built it? Both you and I think that we may be fighting some cultural issues in both of these. You may be fighting a bigger cultural battle with more fronts than I
Right.
had on the board, but we both believe that, and that comes out in the second video. Do you focus on results? Right? Are you focused on results? Are you simple and creative in the way that you focus on results? And are you building robust and sustainable answers? Right?
Right.
This is the formula to getting, and have you figured that out? If you haven't even begun figuring that out, that ought to float right a red flag to you also. Um, have you figured out how to communicate about this, the good and the bad? I'm not sure in this company we've figured out how to communicate about our use of AI in this company, right? You and I, as board chair and CEO, we knew we were using AI. We've been using it for a long time. This was introducing a new architecture, the agentic architecture in the forward customer facing role.
Right.
Well, we weren't talking about all the other things we've done. And maybe we should have, right? And maybe we should, because it's a different story to go out to the marketplace or to tell our investors or to tell our people, we are going to implement AI forward thing, as opposed to we've been using AI, we use it all over this company. Here's where we use it, blah, 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 blah. And this is the next move we're going to make with all this experience about how to manage it, right? They're different messages. And so it's being able to know how to communicate. Now, like I said, you could go down through these 10 things and you could say to yourself, well, I failed on every one. You probably will. The matter is just how much degree, and is it throwing red flags for you that says, I don't know if I've thought this one through enough yet. So this is the point you and I get to. When you get to the point where you can take those 10 things and run down through it, and it's not throwing a bunch of red flags or penalty flags on the field for you, you're on safer ground. In this particular case, that could have told you something right there, and you don't have to go very far down the list to start saying, you know what, whatever I'm doing, I don't know that we have our hands around it yet. And that's really the key for those of us that build companies. It's just to know that and say, okay, I don't care. Time is not my friend. I have to proceed because the risks outweigh me waiting, right? Or they
Right.
don't. The risk is greater by me waiting than it is for me to take an action and potentially be wrong, right?
Right.
So it what we did was we gave you the ability to look at as you said, the essence of the marketplace in the whole idea of how do you function, what's your mindset of a leader. It's the marketplace. Make sure you've got your sense on that essence of the marketplace. It's the what we call the strategy model, which is vision, mission, strategy. Then it's the leadership management model, which is the execution piece: what, when, why, how, who. And then it's the assessment questions. What am I missing? How do motivations align? And is time my enemy or my friend? And then what are my job responsibilities? Those are all things you could use even one. If you just use one, it's probably going to do a pretty good job of telling you you're dealing with a hot potato here, not one that's room temperature. Now, I've just said a lot in a very very long period of time here, Deirdre. But why don't you take us to the end? But to me, it's about looking for those how many red flags do you have on the field, and are there too many?
And let me just pick up on that comment and put this all in context. This is the first of our two making a decision videos. So what we're talking about here, what we've been talking about in the first of two videos on making a decision is, frankly, have you done the work? Are you the person who can make the right decisions in this particular situation? The scenario we put forth when we were playing roles in the board discussion video.
We were performing, not playing, dear. We were performing.
Performing. Well, maybe I was playing, you were
So
performing.
I was not.
Anyway,
I was playing.
is that we were not the people who should have been having that conversation.
Yeah.
We had not done our prep work. We had not done the thinking. And even worse, we had forgotten what our responsibilities are. A conversation between a board chair and a CEO should operate at a certain level. Yes, they could be best buddies, but it has to operate at a certain level. And that level wasn't there. It didn't meet the standards of professionalization that, Tom, you and I would propose for business today. So, what did people have to do? You can't forget the fundamentals when you're dealing with these new topics. It all, to my mind at least, comes back to the fundamentals. What's on your radar screen? Is the right stuff there? Do you know your marketplace? Do you know your customers? Do you understand your current strategy? Do you know how to adapt your strategy? Do you know how to execute this strategy? Are you missing too much? Are the motivations too off? Do you have your time factor right? These are fundamentals in terms of operating as a CEO, in terms of operating as a board chair. So we're going to keep coming back to fundamentals. In fact, when we get to the three stage, that's 71-3, we'll talk more about the fundamentals in relation to the situation. But I hope that this particular video shows you why you need the fundamentals and why we keep hammering on them.
Yes, and dear, the one of the reasons we like to keep using these frameworks to help people understand is they will pop in your mind as you
Correct.
start thinking about them more. This missing thing is constant. We were dealing with some of this earlier today,
Right.
where it was the question about missing. What are you missing
Right.
in what you're looking at? And sometimes, the point was I had seen it. I wasn't recognizing it. There's a
Right.
difference. You
Right.
not only saw it, but also recognized it. And it was trying to get me to recognize and internalize it as a
Right.
real issue that throws a huge flag on the table.
Right.
And this is a big deal because it changed dramatically how we were going to approach something. Didn't change whether we were going to do it or not, but how we approached doing it. So
Correct.
this is the work that we love doing, and we hope we're communicating well enough to you all. But Deirdre, as always, it's a pleasure.
Tom, always a pleasure.